And to set the context for today's conversation, let us first view a short audio-visual on the theme of multi-domain warfare. In 2025, the battlefield has no boundaries. It exists everywhere data travels, and anywhere a signal can be jammed. Wars are no longer declared, they are detected. A blackout in one grid, a breach in another, and somewhere a silent line of code ignites a global response. Decoding the invisible wars of code and cognition. Cyber warfare, the invisible frontline. Lieutenant General M.U. Nair, PVSM, AVSM, SM, retired. And exploring the newest theatre of strategy. Space warfare, the strategic high ground. Lieutenant General Anil Kumar Bhatt, PVSM, UYSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, retired. Two domains unseen, yet decisive. Where the next war may begin, long before the first shot is fired.
And we are privileged to be joined by two highly decorated veterans of the Indian Army, Lieutenant General M.U. Nair, PVSM, AVSM, Sena Medal, who will speak on cyber warfare, the invisible front line. And he is going to be joined by Lieutenant General Anil Kumar Bhatt, PVSM, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Sena Medal, and Vishisht Sena Medal, who will share his perspective on space warfare, the strategic high ground.
And moderating the session will be Shravan Sen, our senior editor at Republic Media Network. Over to you, Shravan.
I believe the stage was already set by General Chandpuria, part of it that has already been covered. So what we'll essentially do, two other key aspects. General Bhatt, who is within the system, who understands the threats that India today faces from the from the space domain, and General Nair when it comes to cyber. I want to begin by asking you, General Bhatt, we are talking in the backdrop of Operation Sindoor, and what we have been saying, one of the finest military operations to have been carried out. But what we do not know was the attempt that was made by the Pakistanis to disrupt the system. 7,000 attacks that have actually taken place during the Operation Sindoor itself. General Bhatt, from the space realm, is India well equipped for having a real-time monitoring when it comes to space? The same very targets that were carried out, could we have actually got real-time space imaging capabilities? Do we really have that?
It's a very difficult question you're asking me. And whatever I'm telling you is from the open domain and not from sources within. And what I would emphasize is that the satellite capability we had for specifically ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and recce, which was most importantly what armed forces require, what is on the other side of the hill, all information. I think we had adequate satellites for that. But what I would like to say is today the requirement of the three armed forces is persistent ISR, 24/7 ISR. And that means that if our aircraft strike Pakistan, the pilot while he's coming back comes to know what he has hit and what are we going to hit again. But that kind of capability we don't presently have. Because with the number of satellites we have, which is a total of 50, and ISR satellites approximately 10, our revisit time is limited to days, 4 to 5, 6 days, at best 2 days. So in this Operation Sindoor, we were very largely dependent on a number of foreign satellite suppliers. From Maxar to Planet M to ICCI, they were all providing us services. And yes, along with what we got and what we could analyze, we had a much better view of the battlefield.
General M.U. Nair, when it comes to the cyber domain, it allows us deniability. What we saw Pakistan doing, 7,000 attacks during Operation Sindoor, trying to destabilize our system itself. Give us a sense, because you are within the system, to understand what the cyber threats that India essentially faces. what's the reality? Many of us in this room would have actually seen those images of the precision strikes. What we do not know is behind those precision strikes are yet another challenge that India was facing.
Thank you for, it's wonderful that I could be part of this particular seminar or conclave. I just wanted to put it across saying that many of the speakers, earlier speakers, including the chief, mentioned about cyber as one of the domains of warfare today. It's not during conflict situations only that this particular domain becomes active. It's actually connecting each one of us today. And imagine a situation where if any of our services which the government provides, or if there is a service like the Air Chief mentioned about the integrated air defense controls, command control system which the Air Force has, a network which is actually protecting our airspace. If a cyber attack happens on a network like that, the impact of it on national security. So the cyber domain today connects both the citizens as also the armed forces, or across the board it's actually connecting all the critical sectors of government. So this is something which works even during peacetime, like you are all aware of cyber scams, etc. Now, there are on a routine a large number of cyber attacks which happen even during peacetime. If you just Google, you'll find that there are about 100 million attacks which enter Indian cyberspace on a routine basis. Conflicts in any part of the globe has an impact on other nations. Like if our Ministry of External Affairs or any other, if we speak on a subject aligning with that particular initiative, there will be a response in cyberspace immediately, which can be felt. In this specific case, Op Sindoor was a conflict situation. And it didn't happen from 7th of May. It actually started on 22nd April itself, when the Prime Minister mentioned about a response. So our cyberspace became very, very active since then. And what had happened was the quantum of attacks went so much that it actually quadrupled, or it was much more than what was actually happening in our cyberspace. Now, it has an impact on our populace citizens. It has an impact, as I mentioned, on the armed forces too. So while we took precautions to secure our cyberspace in terms of sensitizing every single ministry department right down to the CISOs, the Chief Information Security Officers, there was a lot of cyber warriors at work trying to protect their assets. And I'm glad to say that we could withstand this kind of attacks, which was probably unprecedented in any part of the globe. We had learned our lessons from history. I'm sure you would have also seen that during any major event like the G20 conclave which we have in our country, we faced a very severe cyber attack. So similarly, we were prepared this time, and it was thanks to the cyber warriors operating in multiple sectors that we could protect our cyber landscape to a large extent. There were vulnerabilities, there were small little defacements which took place, but I can vouch for it that none of you here were ever impacted through any of the collapse of UPI, for that matter. If you imagine that in a situation like that, suddenly your financial sector or any of your banking services collapse, did that happen? Now, this is the impact of how resilient we were in cyber landscape. But not to say that it's work. We did it perfectly. There were gaps. It could also impact on our telecom networks. Now, the telecom networks are the backbone of all the digital connectivity which the armed forces have. While the armed forces have its own networks which are not integrated with any other networks, but there are challenges which can happen if our telecom networks get impacted. So we had all our telecom service providers playing a very, very active role monitoring their ecosystem. So all in all, I think we responded to Op Sindoor in an effective manner during the cyber domain was well protected.
You're saying that they were unprecedented attacks. I'll come to the nature of these unprecedented attacks because I think so it is important for everyone who's watching. Millions of viewers who would be watching through Republic TV would like to know that what is it that we went through. We saw the pictures, but there is a lot that has gone behind. General Bhatt, I want to come to you. We're talking at a time when China has had 65 orbital launches in 2025. Pakistan in the next day after would be launching its HS-1. Of course, not on their own, with the help of the Chinese. where does India really stand when it comes to the SSR, that is the situational awareness that we have, the space situational awareness?
Before I answer your question as to specifically SSA, let me just put things in context. Yes, China today is second, if you would say, in assets, in capabilities in space. But that said, China is looking at a global signature and it is rivaling, going to the number one position. For our requirements of ISR, PNT, communication, we have adequate satellites, or we have a plan which is going to roll out, and that is SPS-3, where we will have adequate satellites to meet the requirement of our defense forces. Now you're coming into the domain of SSA, that is space situational awareness. Beyond that is space domain awareness, which is more of a military need. Knowing every adversary's satellite up in space, knowing about the location of your own satellites, and then there is another threat called debris. Millions of them floating around, each like a bullet, and you have to protect your assets from that. In SDA, we have two things. One is capabilities which are already there with ISRO in terms of telescopes and radars, and also in the private sector now, capabilities are being developed. While as on today in the world, most of SDA information comes from USA, from the Space Force, which provides it globally to everyone. But beyond that, this is one domain we have to create a capability, and we are creating it in the private sector as well as with the government. And the Defense Space Agency, one of their primary role is to look at SSA.
General Bhatt, just a follow-up question to what you said was with regards to the situational awareness. I want to ask you, for instance, when we carried out a precision strike at Chaklala, and we wanted perhaps to get a real-time understanding of what's really happening, because there has been a global narrative that was essentially built around the kind of damage. Have we really come a long way, and perhaps the world really needs to know the fact that we have been able to establish the fact there is dominance when it comes to space, and the fact that if you compare it from the neighborhood perspective, we have come a long way?
So what you're talking of is ISR. Having information through satellites of the enemy's area or a specific target, be it Noor Khan, be it Chaklala, or be it anywhere. Yes, that capability we have, but there also, as I said, most critical is revisit time and accuracy. Accuracy, we are there. We are comfortable with 30 centimeter and below, which we have. But for revisit times, like I said, our times today is in days. And what we require is persistent, continuous ISR. That will take a little time. Even after the 52 satellites come of SPS-3, we will have a revisit time of maybe a day. But ultimately what the armed forces require is persistent, continuous ISR. That may take a little more time.
General Nair, cyber certainly gives us the option of deniability, as I pointed out earlier. And what we perhaps haven't really honed to a certain extent is that in a situation like Operation Sindoor, were we in a position to carry out a counter cyber attack and perhaps to a certain extent keep our enemies a little bit more flummoxed than what they were? Are we capable enough to do that?
Okay, I think Ajay mentioned about multi-domain operations in this previous discourse. So all aspects of power which is available with a nation is used in conflict situations. So I'm sure cyber domain was also being exercised for causing, inflicting damage to an adversary's infrastructure. So that's natural course, what follows a conflict situation. We have organizations in the armed forces in civil domain which has the capabilities to cause such, to observe our cyber domain, to see if from where the attacks are coming in, to see if there are vulnerabilities in our own ecosystem. So all this is continuously analyzed, and there are measures which have been taken to make sure that our ecosystem gets protected. Like I mentioned in the earlier, that despite all these challenges, we could withstand this kind of attacks. And any measures taken to protect this ecosystem, it could be operations which are launched against adversary, it could be on to any other, we could even block our entire country. So these are all measures which are adopted as part of deterrence.
Did you all see any new pattern, particularly this time? Because cyber warfare is not something new. And the fact of the matter is that we are living in the era of global conflicts, as we have been saying. Things are emerging. We have seen what's happening in Russia, Ukraine. We have seen what happened as far as Israel-Hamas is concerned. Cyber domain becomes extremely, extremely challenging. Is there a new pattern that you all have seen in terms of the way the attacks are being carried out by our enemies?
Yes, with the changes in technology taking place, in fact, literally every day, especially in the digital domain, there are multiple types of vectors, and in fact, you'll find a new kind of tradecraft, or this is a new methods of exploiting the vulnerabilities in our ecosystem emerging literally every day. In fact, the AI today facilitates you to write software codes which can exploit some of our vulnerabilities, which can detect vulnerabilities. So all this is possible. So we found newer challenges emerging, but I think, as I mentioned, we were able to withstand all this. We should also understand that our digital infrastructure today in our country is probably the largest in the world. And we are the storehouse of the largest data in the world. If that be so, and we also have a mix of both legacy equipments in our ecosystem. It could be for any critical infrastructure, and we have modern equipments in our system. So many of these legacy equipments today are not adequately protected because it's capital intensive to replace the entire ecosystem. You look at energy sector. There could be power generation plants which are of yesteryear still functioning, providing energy to the population. There could be telecom networks which are having hardware, software, which are of old vintage, but difficult to replace it at that point of time. So there are vulnerabilities. The software functions are, every day there is a new software coming up in our ecosystem. You look at your own mobile devices, number of apps which are coming up, literally, number of apps which are there. Every day there is a change in number of applications coming up. There are modern versions coming up. There are patches coming up into your mobile phones. Now, are you all aware? Now, do you know that if there is no support from the OEM for your smartphone, like Android 12 and earlier versions are not supported, or Windows 10 has, the Microsoft has finished its, the maintenance of that from October 15th. These are all things which are exploited, and there will be newer versions. The craft can actually emerge from a child or a student in a university. It can happen from an organized group. It can operate from a state-sponsored agency, or it can even be done by military professionals today. So the entire landscape of cyber keeps changing, and we did face newer versions of attack vectors during Sindoor.
General Bhatt, when it comes to the space, is there a kind of a space war? The reason why I'm asking is that Navy already has its own satellite. The Air Force does, the Army essentially wanting to build. There is a narrative that some are essentially building, and that narrative is that there is a space war. Who exactly is going to really control? Is there a proper integration that are we really looking at? Is there a roadmap?
So, firstly, I'll like to correct this version of naval satellites, Air Force satellites, or Army satellites. They are none. They are best said called armed forces satellites. Because, for example, Rukmini, yes, the initiative was from the Navy, but it is being used by all three services. Similarly, the Air Force satellite, so-called Air Force satellite, is used by all three services. And in future, we are calling it an Army satellite. Again, a misnomer. It will be used by all three services. This is just for communication. But in ISR, every possible satellite will be used by all users, that is the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. Now, coming to who will lead space or all aspects of space in India, well, that the Indian Armed Forces have really clearly defined for themselves. And the Defence Space
What's
Agency...
What's the definition of it? Because there's no clear demarcation there.
So, Defence Space Agency is the lead agency for all matters space in India today. And it will definitely evolve into a Defence Space Command. Presently, the lead service for that is the Air Force. But that is because, like cyber, we have given it to the Navy. We have given Air Force to look after space. Space will be a separate force. It will be carrying out facilities, services for all three services. Because anything which we have, any kind of asset, we can't ill afford to have it only for the army or the navy or the air force. And as it is, war in space will be integrated. It is a different domain of war and not air, land or sea.
Is there a timeline that you essentially look at? Because things are evolving very rapidly. And of course, we are dealing with an extremely volatile situation in the neighborhood. Where do we really stand in terms of the years to come, in where we stand as far as the space allocation is concerned?
So firstly, in ISR, the government has already, last year, given 28,000 crores for making 52 satellites. And the best part is, out of these 52, 31 satellites will be made by the private sector. That is SBS 3. And beyond that, of course, we have to go to SBS 4 and SBS 5. That is for ISR. For communication, already, under the CDS, they are planning that there will be a multi-orbital satellite constellation, not only GEO, but MEO and low Earth orbit, a combined constellation which will be again providing communication services not only to the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, but all three services. As far as PNT goes, and as you're well aware, NAVIC is the system which we have in space at the moment. NAVIC again will be used by all three services. We have not started actually seriously using it by the three services, but in the future we have to.
General Nair, disinformation warfare, a technique that our neighbors have been using it to the hilt, and we have been fighting it out as a network too. Pakistanis certainly did not have the ability, but the only thing that they were focused was largely the disinformation warfare during Operation Sindoor. I want to understand from you the nature of disinformation that we witness, and I want to get into specifics of it, because I remember during 370, abrogation of 370, there were senior officers with whom we had a discussion while we were in Srinagar, and they said that, look here, we had no other option, but the internet had to be snapped. There is no other option. We couldn't have done it because the Pakistanis would have continued with this kind of a warfare. During Operation Sindoor, what is the nature to which they have actually gone to in terms of disinformation?
If you look at any conflict situation for that matter, I think first aspect is truth suffers every time. You look at Mahabharata, if you go into mythology, you'll realize that how did Ashwatthama, that the rose of Ashwatthama actually enabled, I think Dronacharya was killed because of a ruse which happened. Now, in Op Sindoor, you would have seen that a lot of media information which is coming. Today, understand that the power of generating information is available to each one of us here. As citizens, from a smartphone today, you can actually generate information. And it could be in the form of a deepfake, it could be an AI-generated image, it could be an AI-generated video. It can happen to all of us today, and we have the capability and capacity. Earlier, it was restricted only to either spoken, or it could be on word-to-mouth, electronic or print media. Today, the power is available with each one of you here. And there are organizations which are working on disinformation also. So, there would be impact of deepfakes. Now, how do you prevent it is another question. There needs to be, all of us need to work together to make sure that every original image or original data which is there has to be having an imprint. This is something which I think the governments are all working on. Can we have a system to prevent deepfakes on especially AI generated? So these are all things which are on. I think we as a society need to live with this particular thing, and maybe correct timely information like what happened post Op Sindoor is probably the only way to tell the truth or convey the truth to the people. And it was very well orchestrated during Op Sindoor. We had multiple sessions by the MOD. Maybe we could have done this through languages, regional languages. That's something which even the media houses could actually look at. Can you convert, most of the press briefings were in English or Hindi. Can we reach out to the populace through regional languages? Can we reach out to the global audience, as was mentioned by one of the speakers in the morning session also, can we have our embassies or missions abroad picking up from the PIB link or from the MIB, Ministry of Information Broadcasting link, and then telling the people what's truth? This is something which we could actually practice for future.
I want to end with you, General Bhatt. Drawings from Operation Sindoor and the global conflicts which are underway. What in your mind is paramount right now? What is the need of the hour? And what is it that we need to look out for?
So this is of course there that we do recognize that space is a very, very important domain for any future battles or for the security of the nation. What is there is, do we develop our capabilities in the pace which is required now? The first steps have been taken and a whole of nation approach is also there. What I'm very happy is in 2020 the government announced that private space should also now participate in contributing into space. And the new startups in India, let me tell you, have done a fantastic job. And they will live up to contribute for the security of India in space. All regulations, as I would say, are in place. What is there is a little more push for us to... We have advantage, what ISRO has given us in 60 years. We are one of the very few spacefaring nations of the world, and we need to build upon this advantage to ensure the security of the nation from space continues.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. In fact, I want to just share this because General G.D. Bakshi is also here. During the entire Operation Sindoor, the disinformation warfare, the way it was being targeted, in fact, you've had the DG ISPR spending a considerable amount of time watching at Republic TV, while Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod had a detailed presentation. Pakistanis were more concerned about how Republic was actually covering it. Had slides of General G.D. Bakshi and us, and that was their coverage of their operation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant General Nair, and thank you, Lieutenant General Anil Kumar. But I'd request Shravan Sen, our senior editor, to please felicitate both our senior officers here.